Captain Atom is a hero that DC seemingly stopped caring about in 2011, which is also wild to think about when you realize just how powerful this guy is. Captain Atom is like Shazam in the sense that they were both characters DC amalgamated from other publishers. Shazam came from Fawcett Comics, whereas Captain Atom came from Charlton Comics, which by the way is the same publisher that Peacemaker also initially hailed from. But while Peacemaker has only become more relevant with time thanks to his amazing HBO Max and DC live action series, Captain Atom has become less and less relevant, sadly. He was considered a powerhouse back in the day, capable of reconstructing matter, self-sustenance, teleportation, and even time manipulation, to name a few of his abilities. But you wouldn't know it to see him lately. He rarely appears now, and when he does, it's normally to get beat up by other folks who he should, in theory, outclass, like Gotham Girl and The Fraction. Are there any heroes who you feel have been disrespected like this? Let me know in the comments, because this always bothers me when stuff like this happens. Captain Atom also served as the inspiration for Watchmen's Dr. Manhattan, but today, Dr. Manhattan I would say is more well known and more relevant than Captain Atom himself now is. Wild. Speaking of someone who is less relevant now than when they first appeared, Maxima was initially a villain in the comics somewhat before she became a hero. She was introduced to us as an alien attracted to Earth kind of by Superman, whom she sought to become her mate, abandoning her betrothed at the time, Ultra. She made her first appearance in the 90s and honestly was a super 90s character. Like, look at this costume. Look at her original New Earth costume. That was what she was, at least to start. In modern day, Maxima is still a queen and is an ally to Superman. She also ends up being in love with a woman and actually gets help from Wonder Woman to keep both her crown and her partner, but even then, that story actually happened back in 2020, so still, it's been a while. And that's with, once again, a Maxima who I feel like has been changed somewhat. This next character, who is someone who has been in and out of the spotlight for a while, swapping out now and then with another character who shares her hero name, is once again out of the spotlight. And I want to know, why can't we have both? When it comes to Huntress, it seems like we can only ever have one of them at a time for some reason. Now don't get me wrong, I am a big fan of Helena Wayne, of which we now have a version back again in this new golden age. But where, oh where, is Helena Bertinelli? I feel like anytime one Helena is in, the other one has to be out. Look at how many Spider-Mans Marvel has. I mean, I think we can handle 2 Huntresses, no? I feel like DC is like, you can't, you'll be confused. I'm like, dude, if I can understand your continuity, I can understand anything. Anything. I could be a brain surgeon right now, but instead I read comics. The Huntress we are currently missing here is Helena Bertinelli, an ally of the Batman family and a member of the original Birds of Prey. Helena has sworn to fight against organized crime as part of a personal vendetta to get back at those who killed her family. She also has come into conflict with other vigilantes due to her willingness to kill her enemies, at least initially. As far as I can tell, the last major appearance of Bertinelli's Huntress was in the Shadows of the Bat event in 2022 when she appeared in Detective Comics. But yeah, I feel like since Helena Wayne has come back in, she's kind of taken more of a back seat. So even though she did appear in that event, it still feels like we haven't really seen her. She's not as prominent as she used to be. Number 7, Jill Trent, also known as the Science Sleuth. Jill Trent was a hero based out of the US. She took on criminals and solved mysteries with detective and inventing skills, and the power of science. Science is pretty cool. She also had her friend Daisy to accompany her. Her and Daisy even shared a bed, which makes a lot of people speculate that she could have been one of the first queer heroes to have ever appeared in comics. Jill Trent made her debut in the Fighting Yank Volume 6 in 1943, originally published by Meteor Publishing, who has since then ceased operations. I think Jill would be a rad hero to bring back. I would love to see a female, possibly queer scientist take down some criminals. Who wouldn't? Number 6, Forget-Me-Not. Although this X-Men was recently introduced, making his debut in the comics in 2014, you may have already forgotten him. Though, like with the Sentry, that might not be your fault. Forget-Me-Not's abilities is imperceptibility. That is to say, it is almost impossible to remember him, and he is also hard to target. As your mind struggles hard to remember him, that can also leave him sometimes undetectable. His powers are so strong, they even mess with those who also possess telepathic gifts, including Charles Xavier, who basically had to set an hourly psychic alarm to remind himself of Forget-Me-Not's existence, so he wouldn't forget. Now, that's someone who everyone could forget about. Wait, who are we talking about again? Number 5. Cyber 6. When it comes to this hero/heroine, I mostly think back to the cartoon series inspired by the comics, and watching it late at night on TV as a kid. The cartoon series, by the way, was actually produced in Vancouver, Canada, fun fact, though the animation was done in Japan. The comic book series, like the cartoon series, also originated in the 1990s. The comic series originated in Argentina, although it was published in Italy. Cyber 6 is a story of a genetically engineered woman who goes by the same name. She escaped her creator, a Nazi overlord who seeks world domination. Living in the city, she adopts the identity of a male literature teacher named Adrian Seidelman by day, and fights off her creator's creatures at night, who have been sent after her. Cyber 6 also uncovers many mysteries in regards to her past, fellow siblings known as Cybers, and her evil creator's dastardly plots. Number 4. Captain Ultra. We may forget this hero for good reason. When Captain Ultra is first introduced in the comics, making a brief appearance in Fantastic Four Volume 1, Issue 177, it is revealed that he has a fear of fire. That's one of the first things we learn about him. Yep. And when I say he has a fear, what I really mean is he is borderline terrified, to the point that someone lights a cigarette, just lights a match, and he faints. Griffin Goggle, yep, that is Captain Ultra's real life name, is what I like to call a background hero. From his brief stint with the Defenders to the tiniest of appearances in the Civil War II event, Griffin is a hero who never really comes to the forefront in the comics, which is why he is probably one who often remains forgotten. He's also a bit of a knob. When flirting with Hellcat, he gets overly competitive and aggressive with Nova and Jack of Hearts, who he deems as threats to their love. And keep in mind, he's just met her at this point. Later, when Hellcat asks the heroes to stop fighting over her, Captain Ultra instead gets aggressive with her and accuses her of playing the field. Oh boy. Maybe a hero better forgotten. Number 3. Scorpion. Wait, no, not that Scorpion. The other Scorpion. I'm talking about Carmilla Black. If you are not familiar with Carmilla Black, no worries at all. I'm going to give you some facts that will probably cause you to want to track her down, as she is not someone who is often explored in the comics, which is unfortunate because she's pretty awesome. She was genetically created by AIM, but didn't know about this until later, as she was raised by adoptive parents who were also secretly AIM agents. Surprise. Her powers surfaced on her prom night, causing what she calls her stinger arm to accidentally shoot her boyfriend and kill him. As if prom night isn't usually awkward enough, jeez. Her abilities allow her full immunity to most toxins. In fact, she has the ability to absorb toxins and convert them into her own biological weapon, which she can then use to prick her enemies with via her stinger arm. While often being involved in heroic tasks, she has been involved in both good and bad organizations, having worked for both S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra. Woo! And fun fact, she even beat Matt Gargan in a fight after he came after her for using his old name. He had the Venom symbiote with him at the time, and her body was able to absorb some of it and create a Neo symbiote, which she used to send Gargan running before the Neo symbiote died, as a result of her body being too toxic for it. Ah. Number 2. Azrael. Whatever happened to Azrael? You might remember this controversial hero as Batman. After the events of Nightfall, Bruce Wayne is forced to relinquish his title while taking time to heal after he had his back broken. He entrusts Gotham to Azrael and asks him to watch over the city and take up the mantle of Batman while he's away. Jean-Paul Valley was trained to be used as a tool by a radical and evil religious group called the Order of Saint Dumas, a group who were once part of the historical Knights Templars. Ooh. And unfortunately, this resulted in him being, well, a little crazy. He regained the city as Batman, taking it back from Bane, and then began a brutal onslaught of vigilante justice. While he didn't kill Bane, he brutalized him and every other criminal he came across, no matter how minor. He actually almost killed the Joker. It was his lack of restraint and madness that ended up leading to his downfall as Batman. And when Bruce returned, the two ended up having to battle over the title of Batman. Jean-Paul was reluctant to give it up. Once forced to give it up by Bruce, who won the fight, he wandered homeless and crazy for a while. He ended up defeating the Order of Saint Dumas eventually, whom he realized were his enemies, but after that he basically just became Bruce's and the Bat family's assistant, helping him whenever he was called upon and acting on Bruce's every order. He died and was briefly resurrected as a Black Lantern, but it would be nice to see a real return of Azrael in the comics. Maybe a story where he tries to find and follow his own path? Number 1. Stardust, the Super Wizard, one of the oldest superheroes on our list. Stardust, the Super Wizard, comes to us from the Fantastic Comics collection. He debuted in issue number 1 in 1939. The series was published by Fox Feature Syndicate, and each issue had a collection of short heroic stories. While you may remember the main hero, Samson, Stardust is one of the others that have fallen by the wayside. Probably one of the first cosmic heroes. Stardust is often seen flying around outer space trying to bust criminal space wizards. Yeah, apparently criminal space wizards were a thing back in the 1930s. His comics are a combo of sci-fi and superheroics, as he fights criminals with his astounding number of different rays. He's a wizard with a ray for every different occasion. Boomerang ray, transporting ray, reducing ray, all the rays. And beams sometimes too. Sometimes he uses beams. If you weren't aware of the Fantastic Comics collections, you should check them out. There is even a sort of female superhero snuck in one of the issues. I say sort of because she wasn't really given a title, but her name is Alice, and she is both the romantic partner and adventure partner of Richard, the Golden Knight, who is also featured in the series. Guess she's kind of more like a sidekick.
Number 10, reach with me. Sue Storm, Judo Master. Sue Storm, aka the Invisible Woman, has had a lot of expansion made to her powers as her character has evolved since her debut in the Fantastic Four #1 back in 1961. From invisibility and mild force fields to the phenomenal level of power she now wields. Her understanding of her powers and the ability to project force fields around others, use them as concussive blasts, cut off the oxygen of others, throw people, cloak people, and just in general be extremely useful, have all made her a force to be reckoned with. Also levitation, moving around like that, flying. But what about when she doesn't have her powers? The thing with a powered hero is there's always that potential depowered arc lurking just around the corner. So thank goodness Sue Storm is a master of judo. Okay, master may be an exaggeration. Okay, it is. But she'd still win because she's Sue Storm. She was trained in judo by her husband, Mr. Fantastic, as well as Iron Fist, The Thing, and the She-Hulk, so lots of training. This obviously Sue forgets about because why would she have to while she has her powers? In other trained in combat news, Spider-Man was trained by Shang-Chi. He taught him Kung Fu to replace his spider sense while it was gone for a bit. His Kung Fu mastery was so intense he could dodge bullets, you know, as you do. He was still a white belt. Number 9. Plastic Man. He has rubber organs. Plastic Man first debuted in Quality Comics back in 1941. He would later be bought as a DC asset after Quality Comics shut down in 1956. Plastic Man is most often used as a comedic hero thanks to his loud and over-the-top personality power combo. The term plastic being used here is more classic, like plasticine, pliable, etc. Whereas now when you think of plastic, most people think of rigid or banned. Lots of plastic is banned here. He has a huge list of powers and abilities: stretching, morphing, turning into a bouncy ball, density control, regeneration, telepathic immunity, but there are some he forgets. Rubber organs is one. He's pretty much nigh invulnerable, so if he's ever panicking about being crushed or the like, there's no need. Also, there's the fact that he can detect ultrasonic frequencies. It's not played with as much as it ultimately could be. When something of that effect is happening, his body will start to ripple. He's like a canary in a coal mine. He can be their warning system. For those not familiar with that expression, if you were in a mine, miners used to bring down canaries. If the bird dies, there's gas in the mine and you need to get out. Rippling is much less traumatizing. Number 8. Spider-Woman's Pheromones. We're talking about Jessica Drew specifically here. She debuted in Marvel Spotlight number 32 back in 1977, and for a time everything about her was in flux because of her rushed creation. Still, as her powers evolved, one that was there and still is, was that she emitted pheromones. At first, they were purely negative and made people dislike her. She was emitting a repellent that made others feel like she was abrasive essentially. However, over time this expanded into positive pheromones that could be used to attract people. First men, and then just people. Here's the thing. Pheromone powers are creepy. Well, let's just say it takes a lot of skill to write them and not end up in a Star Fox situation. So these days writers tend to focus on other things, and what with her being a mom and all, well, still Spider-Woman, Jessica Drew has a lot going on, so it's easy to leave the pheromones to the wayside. Or maybe they're back and this is all just me having wishful thinking. Number 7. Batman and accelerated de-aging. Now I hear you, you cretin, which is a real thing I was called the other day. I'm feeling old school and sophisticated. Now this is specific to an arc. It's a Morrison thing from when Batman died in Final Crisis. Of course we all knew he'd be back, so it was hardly the most suspenseful occurrence. So after Bruce was hit by Darkseid's Omega Beams, it looked like he died, but really he was sent back in time and had to go on an epic quest to get back to our timeline through different time periods like Stone Age Batman, Pirate Batman, Pilgrim Batman. No matter the era, he was Batman, and he fought his way back to the present, or the future from his perspective. However, he spent time in these time periods, so he technically should have aged. So an explanation was derived for why he didn't come back as an old man, and that was that traveling through time had granted him temporary de-aging abilities. Now as a concept, this isn't that weird. A build-up in time travel energies is a good way to add a heretofore unseen ability. It's how the Silver Agent is granted powers in Astro City, it's also the source source of the Samaritan's abilities partially. However, when it comes to Batman, this is a way to explain a plot hole that people would have ignored anyway. We all know that Bruce is like perma-stuck in between 32 and 35. Number 6. Superman. Mini versions. So this is a one-issue thing, specifically Superman number 125, and it involved Superman being able to shoot a miniaturized version of himself out of his hands. This was because after an encounter with an alien ship, Superman lost his powers except for his invulnerability, but he could shoot a mini version of himself out of his hand that had his missing powers. So this is just a fun little adventure, but one that is most often forgotten in the modern era except for on lists like this. Can Superman do this again? Imagine the look on the rest of the Justice Leaguers' faces. Priceless, entirely worth it. Number 5. Green Lantern rings and subconscious mind probing. So Hal has mentioned his ring could do this a couple of times. One example is in issue 175 when he's talking to the Flash, Barry Allen, during his whole "I'm about to go on trial for killing the Reverse Flash" thing. He mentions that he could use his ring to subconsciously probe Barry's mind to see if he did it, but he doesn't. Also, it's not like this is a restricted action or anything. Do we just have to operate on every Lantern's moral compass? How does the ring even do that? Do you just will it? The mind makes it real? This would be really useful if it was regularly employed, but it's one of those things I'm kinda glad seems to have been forgotten. Would you trust a guy with this ability? Jessica Cruz? That's a lot of responsibility. Number 4. Wonder Woman and Super Breath. Now Wonder Woman will do this on occasion, but it's not first up in her arsenal, that's for sure. Like Superman, Wonder Woman also has an increased lung capacity that she can use for super breath. She can create huge gusts, put out flames, just blow over her enemies should she so choose. In all fairness, Clark doesn't use this ability much either. It was even a joke in Super Sons where Clark's son John would sometimes forget he had freeze breath and be like, oh yeah, I forgot I had that. So Wonder Woman seems to forget she has this ability. That or well, the writers forget. It really depends what type of Wonder Woman you're going for. She varies a lot depending on who's writing her. Some have a hard time with her base traits, balancing that compassion with her aggressiveness. And this includes female writers. Just because you're a woman doesn't mean you can write women. Being a woman isn't a superpower. I wish it was. Actually, no I don't. Being a hero is a lot of responsibility. Villain life is a life for me. Number 3. Magneto and sleep induction. Oh yes, what can't Magneto do? He can manipulate the iron levels in your blood. Well, one of the things he has done with this ability is knock people out. They say induce sleep, but really you're being knocked out. You would think he would do this constantly, but like ripping out Wolverine's skeleton, we don't see this very often. Remember that X-Men movie when he drew the iron out of that guy's blood? Like I said in part 1, the variance in Magneto's powers and what he can do can be something to behold. Still, Magneto, master of sleep induction. I don't know, has a good ring to it. Give the people what they want. Magneto, knocking people out with magnetism. Number 2. Superman and hypnosis. So it's down between this and his amnesia kissing ability. When he could kiss people and make them forget, his kiss was just that good. But also, back in the day, Clark was meant to have some latent, low-powered hypnosis ability. And for a time, he had glasses that were Kryptonian tech that enhanced this ability. This was usually so that you could explain why no one could tell that Clark was Superman, because there's really not that much difference between them. Glasses, a curl, sometimes not even a curl. I'm convinced that they all know and are just humoring him so that he doesn't feel bad about his terrible secret identity hiding skills. Like, yeah, Clark, you're not Superman at all. So Clark could stare at you with his Kryptonian eyes and special glasses and make you believe he was plain, mild-mannered, unassuming Clark Kent, and also that he totally turned in all his articles. I'm just adding that. I mean, when did he write anything, ever? Anyone else remember when he was an actual broadcast anchor working for Morgan Edge? Weird times. Number 1. Green Lantern's rings and energy doubles. Listen, when you have a magic space ring controlled by your own will, it can get pretty creative. One of the things the ring could do is mimic a form of astral projection, so you could send a copy of yourself ahead faster than the speed of light. But it's not really useful. It can't alter its surroundings, it can only be perceived by the Guardians or other ring bearers. But anything that your double learns will be transmitted back to you. And what are you doing while all this is going on? Why, you're just there, motionless, open, vulnerable, waiting to be killed. The Guardians do this, but Lanterns themselves, not so much. It could be strategically useful, but if you're just gonna be inert anyway, might as well go there. This one is not the coolest Lantern ability and is often forgotten. But hey, you never know when you need an astral projection force ghost. Number 10. Superman and phasing. Superman has had a wide host of abilities since his creation in Action Comics number 1 in 1938. However, not all his forgotten abilities come from the Golden Age, where it wasn't uncommon for him to do something one issue and then just never do it again. But when it comes to phasing, this one he's used rarely, and fans actually argue about whether he should be able to do it at all. So there is a panel of Superman phasing out of the way of Doomsday's fist. This is post-death of Superman, which raises a lot of questions about that fight, but that's a rant for Kelly. Don't even get her started. So some fans feel that Clark is not fast enough to phase through things, while others note that back in the day, he used to lightly vibrate his molecules when photographs were being taken so he wasn't recognized. So he can do it, he just doesn't. So conceptually, Clark should probably be able to do this, but again, he just doesn't. He forgets. He forgets. He has so many other things he can do that if we add this to him, we're getting into Martian Manhunter turf, stepping on his and the Flash's territory. It would be cool if it was something he can do, but it takes a lot of effort, so he doesn't. Doomsday's worth the effort though. Number 9. Thor All-Tongue. Yet another character who can speak any language. I'm envious of this skill. So this just doesn't come up a lot, although really with a global hero like Thor you'd think it would. Beyond global really. So this isn't exactly like Aquaman. What the All-Tongue is that the listener will hear Thor in their native language, so he's like a walking universal translator essentially. It does come up and has even done so fairly recently, but if you were to ask most people to rank Thor's abilities and name them, this one might not come up at all. Thor isn't exactly known for his negotiating skills. Whether you feel that's fair or not is a mileage varies thing. He is the protector of the 9 realms, so that means he can't just punch his way through everything. So no matter where you are in the world, you'll be able to hear Thor's dulcet tones in your own native tongue. Take comfort in that. Actually, whatever realm you're in, all the realms. Number 8. Spider-Man and controlling spiders. To me, my spider minions. Yeah, I'm glad Spider-Man not only forgets about this, but it was retconned away. He could also talk to them for a bit. I mean, does whatever a spider can, yes, but spiders can't summon hordes of other spiders. So Peter could briefly do this when his powers were enhanced. Kane Parker, one of Peter's lingering clones from the Neverending Clone Saga, can do this. So this would be useful. Few people have the wherewithal to stand there while they're covered in spiders. But it also dives into too far territory for a lot of fans. This is the same reason they didn't like the organic webbing or the pincers. Some of this comes from way earlier arcs when Spidey would keep mutating and it would horrify him. That kind of stuff lingers. Spidey is meant to be a more relatable hero, and summoning an army of spiders is not too relatable. Not to most people anyway. It'll pop up every now and again, but for the most part it's forgotten. Number 7. The Flash and super thinking. We can really take any Flash for this. It's more a general speedster trait. Now the Flash's tagline is that he's the fastest man alive. The CW won't let you forget it. But when people think of this, they think of, well, his running. But the thing is, the Flash is constantly moving, or rather seeing faster than we are. His base speed is not ours, and that includes his thoughts. You know those panels where the Flash starts talking too fast because he wants to convey an idea and then he has to slow down so people can understand him? That's going on with his thoughts too. The only thing is the Flash isn't a genius, but he's no slouch either. He's not dumb, he's friendly, there's a difference. Still, there are 2 layers to this forgetting. One, writers don't want to employ it because it's a constant, so why keep referencing it? Also, it's not very visually stimulating. And also to the Flash, this existence is normal for him. So of course it's something he would forget because for him, it's normal. He's thinking at a regular speed for him. Number 6. Spider-Man and organic webbing. So yes, Peter did have organic webs for a brief moment, like his Raimiverse counterpart. And for that we have to thank J.M. Straczynski, who many Spider-Man fans will know for his work on the much-hated One More Day storyline, or the Demon Divorce storyline as I like to call it. This particular storyline that gave him these webs was called The Other, and in it, Cliff Notes version, Peter's powers were suddenly on the fritz, and it was because he was dying. But when he finally did, after intense battle with Morlun, he was met in the afterlife by a spider god, who told him he had never fully embraced his powers, and that he needed to do so in order to reach his full potential. So he accepts the spider, and when he returns to life he has some new abilities, and one was organic webbing. So people didn't really like this. People don't like it when you mess with an established character's core power base. Also, I realized when I talked about his webbing I did the thwip, like I can do it. Thwip. So this was quickly done away with, and now Peter has forgotten it for the most part, post One More Day. And so have readers, because well, people don't really bring it up, unless they're a person like me, who will never let anything rest, ever. Number 5. Aquaman can speak any language. Poor Aquaman. He first debuted in More Fun Comics number 73 back in 1941, and while the Super Friends years were not kind to him, people keep making fun of him, that his powers are lame, that he's useless, which I never fully understood. What? Because they're on land? He rules the sea, that's most of the earth. He can call for reinforcements from anywhere. I guess except for the desert, but come on. Also, DC keeps flip-flopping on him talking to fish. Sometimes it's just fully embraced, and other times it's no, I give them a telepathic push using my telepathic abilities that are so much cooler than just talking to fish. You know my stance, embrace all the silly. Still, what isn't silly is that Aquaman can speak any language on Earth. He's an omniglot. That's incredibly useful, the situations he could help diffuse. I don't know, just the whole he's useless joke got out of hand, and DC always responds by trying to make him so hardcore. Remember when they cut his hand off and he had a huge beard? 'Cause I do. Number 4. Magneto and invisibility. Now you may be going, this is a heroes list, and yes, I'm skirting the edges a little here, playing fast and loose with the rules, but depending upon what era we're in, Magneto can be good. He's even run Xavier's school, so this isn't coming out of left field. I haven't read House of X yet, so I can't comment on that version, but I've heard the first issue is amazing. Also, Xavier's mind is in Phantom X's body now? Yeah. Anyway, Magneto is known to most since his debut in the X-Men #1 back in 1963 as having magnetic powers. He's the master of magnetism. So he can manipulate magnetism, which means he can also deal in electromagnetic radiation, or light, meaning that with some tweaks he could render himself invisible. Magneto is one of those characters where the scope of his abilities is often shifting, so sometimes he has near godlike abilities, and other times he'll be struggling to do something basic. I don't know, I think this one is fine forgotten. He can already do so much, and also maybe he didn't forget. He just wants to be seen. I mean, all of you know that Magnus loves his theatrics. Number 3. Daredevil can feel colors. So the Daredevil is blind. We all know this, it's an essential part of his origin story, but he has other senses. And one of those, for a time, was the quite humorous one that he could feel color, because different colors had different feels. This has been around since his origin, and for me I like to think it's the reason his first costume was such a hot mess, the yellow and the red. But he's also used it since, for example to tell what hair color someone had so he could dye his the exact same shade for undercover work. Look, there's suspending disbelief and then there's this. They don't use this anymore too much, it's just not necessary. Number 2. Wonder Woman can talk to animals. Yes, she can. I mean, Wonder Woman is a goddess. What goddess can't? For those who watched the 70s Linda Carter Wonder Woman show, they'll remember this, but it is also actually a prominent comic ability. So she doesn't forget that she can do this. This is more a question of other people aren't aware she can do this, and some don't like it because they feel it makes her too princess-like. This ability is useful though. Sometimes the only witnesses to an event are animals, and if you have people who can find out what happened right away, so many situations solved. It's just, well, it plays out rather sillily, and it can kinda alter the mood. There's been an emphasis on her warrior attributes sometimes, and that just kind of shatters the illusion. Number 1. Reed Richards. Yes, Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, Mr. He knows what he did. Well, Reed Richards can shapeshift. First debuting in the Fantastic Four #1 back in 1961, Reed Richards was bombarded by cosmic rays, and it was entirely his fault. Anyways, he developed the ability to stretch to great lengths, and actually, at this point, can alter his appearance, both his face and his whole body, so he can look like anyone or anything. The thing with this is, well, the team doesn't branch off on their own too much. Sue's solo comic in 2019 is her first solo series ever, and so some of their abilities don't always get the chance to shine. And while Reed is often too busy or just thinking of really complex solutions to deal with this ability, and it's not normally where the stories that he's in are going. I think sometimes the writers forget he can do it too. I never have though. Constant vigilance. Still, it makes sense. I mean, it's just stretching and molding, and I believe he would want to master his abilities like this, so he totally practices. Who do you think he practices turning into? I 100% think Doom. I mean, Doom has a Reed Richards doll. It's more like a chess piece, but in my head I like to think it's a stress doll, and he really goes and pops the head off it like he did in that What If story, What If the Fantastic Four had different powers? So good. One of my favorite panels.
Number 10. Savage Dragon. The Savage Dragon is one of Image Comics' most popular and long-lasting characters, and he has been around since his debut as just Dragon in Graphic Fantasy #1 in June of 1982. Basically, the Savage Dragon woke up butt naked and with no memory in a burning field. He was a giant green, quote, man with a big fin on the top of his head and super ripped, like pretty much all heroes are. Now, what we didn't know at the time was that he was actually actually an alien conqueror named Kerr, who originally came to Earth to conquer it, but was betrayed by two scientists. He was an enhanced member of the alien race called the Krillin, and his enhanced Krillin physiology gave him superhuman strength, agility, and stamina, healing abilities, and telepathic resistances. Now, one of my favorite parts about this hero is that instead of joining a superhero team and being a typical hero, the dragon actually wound up being a member of the Chicago Police Department and helped them with their quote super freak problem. I think it's cool to kind of ground the character like that, and I think it would make a great movie. I don't know. Number 9. Animal Man. Thanks to an encounter with some rather strange aliens, which actually happened to be a ruse by the totems of the Parliament of Limbs, Bernard Buddy Baker gained access to the morphogenic field, otherwise known as the Red. This field basically allows Buddy to absorb and use different attributes of nearby animals while still being a human. So he has been able to move his eyes independently like a chameleon, he has been able to ram against a speeding car with the abilities of a rhino, he can fly by tapping into the abilities of birds, he's regenerated a whole lost limb by tapping into an earthworm, he's gained the strength to lift a car by tapping into a spider, and he's ran at 75 miles per hour by adopting the abilities of an ant. The character of Animal Man explores profound philosophical themes, including environmentalism, animal rights, and the interconnectedness of all living beings. His stories, particularly Grant Morrison's run on the character, were actually surprisingly really dark. I don't know if that could really be adapted to be a normal old superhero movie for a family-friendly DCU, but it could make an interesting standalone film maybe. All I know is the character deserves more recognition, and a movie would do that. Number 8. Captain Britain. There is actually a whole Captain Britain core made up of all versions of Captain Britain from across the Omniverse, but for this point, we are specifically going to cover Earth 616's protector, Dr. Brian Braddock. Brian Braddock brings a distinctive blend of British charm, valor, and honor, presenting a fresh and unique superhero persona. His origin story, involving the mystical Amulet of Right and the wizard or entity of Merlin and the parallel dimension of Otherworld, kind of gives us a fresh and fantastical backdrop, allowing for pretty good visuals and epic battles if it were adapted to the screen. Captain Britain's powers, granted by the Amulet of Right, grant him superhuman strength, agility, and the ability to fly, which is nothing really new, but that's not really what would draw people in anyways. The character of Brian Braddock is complex and relatable, grappling with the responsibilities of wielding immense power while maintaining his own sense of identity. A Captain Britain movie would not only showcase his crazy adventures, but also delve into themes of duty, identity, and personal growth, and then, due to the multiversal nature of his conflicts, it would slot really well into the MCU and would make for a fun watch just in general.
Yet another victim of the alien snacking habits is Joe Public. He was a regular Gotham City gym teacher who deeply cared for his students and wanted to see them succeed. When one of his students passed due to a bad, colorful set of pills, he decided to track down the dealer. He knew it was someone called Happy Jack, and the good news is, so did Batman. During the hunt is when Joe and Happy Jack were attacked by the hungry alien. Joe survived, Jack didn't. His power was the ability to absorb the strength and energy of what's around him, but he has to stay near the person or he will lose the power. Him and Batman defeated the alien that bit Joe, and Joe fully stepped into a life of heroics after. He continued to partner with Batman on occasion, one time taking down Corrosive Man. Joe, to my understanding, is just Joe. He is face out, only sunglasses for his eyes, real name is his super name, which is rare. In 1996 is his last appearance and mention. He appears as a hallucination in Batman Shadow of the Bat issue 50, and then in issue 53 he is mentioned by another character to be a friendly vigilante, which implies that he is still out on the town fighting crime. Technically, this next guy did disappear because he moved 6 feet under, but he's so funny I could not let him slip under the radar. His name is Defenestrator, from now on Mr. D. He was a member of Super Squad Section 8. He did start as a bit of a bad guy. He went to Arkham Asylum for attacking an officer, but he was reformed and joined the hero team, which is great. We never get the chance to learn his real name because unfortunately Mr. D gets caught in a crossfire and doesn't make it. His first appearance was in Hitman 18 in 1997, and it was only 3 years later, in issue 52, that he was gone forever. Now the reason this man has made this list is because his method of fighting is maybe my favorite I've ever seen. He carries a window around and smashes it on the enemy's head, and I can't figure out if the window is a magic window that regenerates after each hit, or if he smashes it and then has to go get another window from somewhere. I think it's regenerating because in issue 52, in the beginning of the battle, it gets blown up, but the next window he uses looks exactly like the first window, and he wouldn't have had time to get another window the next time he uses a window. A case could also be made for the windows being held in his massive square-looking suit jacket. Either way, this guy is hilarious, and I hope he gets revived. Winona Littlebird, better known as Owl Woman, has been MIA since her appearance in 2006's Infinite Crisis 7. Fitting, honestly, considering she debuted in the 1986 comic Crisis on Infinite Earths 12. Went in with an Infinite Crisis, went out with an Infinite Crisis. So while I would like to see her again, it's kind of a full circle moment. She is a Native American hero. Her powers include heightened senses, and like an owl, she can see in the dark. She can fly using wind currents and later received some claws. Owl Woman was part of the Global Guardians, fighting alongside members of the Justice League until the team disbanded due to a lack of funding. Unfortunately, though she started out as a hero, she got brainwashed after the Guardians ended by someone named Queen Bee. Queen Bee was the one who gave her the claws, and her plan was to take over the world. Original. Eventually, the brainwashing was reversed, and Owl Woman went on to fighting crime again, even teaming up with Wonder Woman. I love this next kid because there are too many examples of heroes applying for a super squad and then not getting in, and then turning into a villain because their feelings got hurt. But Color Kid, he took rejection like a champ, and he didn't let that stop him from continuing to be a hero. He started out as a lab assistant, just a regular kid, and then was struck by a multicolored light beam from another dimension, average DC experience. The light beam gave him the power to change the color of any object. Excited by his new abilities, he traveled to Earth to audition for the Legion of Superheroes. Unfortunately, his powers, while cool, don't have much use when it comes to fighting crime, so he was rejected. Joke's on them though, one time his powers came in very useful when he changed a kryptonite cloud from green to blue, changing its chemical nature in the process, which meant it wasn't harmful to Superman anymore. He later developed the ability to camouflage himself and even create a sort of fog around people by changing the color of the air around them. So please give my guy some credit. He was a member of the Legion of Substitute Heroes for a while, which is basically made up of a bunch of people rejected from the first Legion. His last comic appearance was in 1994, and he was featured on the animated TV show Legion of Superheroes, which ended in 2008. Latino hero Bushmaster is all about the reptiles and fighting crime. He's teamed up with the likes of Batman and Robin and been a part of the Global Guardians too. His civilian name is Bernal Rojas. He has no superpowers but is very intelligent. He started out as a world-renowned Venezuelan lizard scientist, so he's always been into reptiles. He brought this into his crime-fighting work by creating reptile-themed gadgets. To list a few, because I think they're neat: chameleonic camouflage, terrapin shell, and flying lizard wings, and more. During his time on the Global Guardians, he was also brainwashed, sad, but it's only a few battles later that he's back to himself. The really sad part is once he and the other Guardians parted ways, they are attacked and he doesn't make it. How could they do this to my guy? It happened in 1994's Justice League Quarterly Issue 17. He was around about 8 years before his departure, debuting in 1987's Infinity Inc. 34. There may even be a second Bushmaster somewhere out there. In Final Crisis, a new guy is seen in the outfit running around, but we don't know anything about him, so keep an eye out for Bushmaster Part 2. Crimson Fox is pretty unique. There have been 3 people to take up the name, and yet only 2 versions of the hero. The original first Crimson Fox was a pair of twins, Vivian and Constance. Their parents were killed by a pharmaceutical company. Vowing revenge, the sisters started a rival company and became the Crimson Fox. There was one problem: their company did so well, it put the other one out of business, meaning the sisters were now very public figures. They didn't want it to seem odd if a public figure disappeared every time a hero appeared, so they decided to fake one twin's death so they could be CEO while the other fights. The sisters drew straws to see who would have to fake their death, which is just something that I can see sisters doing. Their main power was pheromone control. They debuted in Justice League Europe in 1989, joining the Justice League of Europe. Unfortunately, Vivian passed while on a mission in 1995, and Constance followed in 1998. Years later, in 2006, another Crimson Fox appears and claims to have inherited the twins' fortune. We just don't know how. She's got all the abilities that the twins had, and she's doing it basically how the twins did, so I say we let her keep going. Online, it lists her final appearance as Checkmate Volume 2, Issue 31, but in the comics, she's seen getting back up after the fight in there, so where did you go, girl? Crimson Fox has also been in 2 TV shows. The first was in the animated show Justice League Unlimited in 2006, and the next was in the 2017 live-action show Powerless. Powerless would have been the last time a version of Crimson Fox was seen. A son of Superman and Wonder Woman is a big deal, so where did he go? Jonathan Kent II was born to the famous heroes in the reality we know as the Kingdom. He first appeared in 1996 in Kingdom Come 4. It's important to say that there are other Jonathan Kents. They are Superman's kids, but with other people in other universes, but this ain't about them. Today's Jonathan has got his parents' powers plus some bonus features. He can travel through time and between dimensions. The hyper-time time manipulation is where he took the inspiration for his name, Hyperman. He seems like he would be a big deal, but he's only had about 5 appearances. That could have something to do with his life story. He was kidnapped as a child from his reality and brought to the main reality by a villain wanting to destroy Superman. His parents and Batman eventually rescued the baby, but he disappeared. Turns out the evil guy had reached hyper time on his way there, so Jonathan slipped back in where he was watched by himself, an older version of himself, the guardian of hyper time. When everything settled, the baby was returned to his parents so he could grow up to be the guardian hero in the future. That was in Justice Society of America Volume 3, Issue 22 in 2009, and that's all for him, I guess. Lionheart hasn't been seen since his cameo in 2008's Trinity Volume 1, Issue 24. He's actually only appeared about 19 times in total. His first appearance in 1993 is in Bloody London. For real, he is just a guy, he was a dock worker, and he has no powers or anything like that, unless you count him being super loyal and super brave. These two traits in particular made him the ideal candidate to defend England as part of a government operative. His impressive lineage was a bonus. He is a direct descendant of King Richard I of England, also known as Richard the Lionheart. Modern Lionheart's civilian name is Richard Plant. We know where the Richard and Lionheart came from, but his last name is from the royal house King Richard was in. He's super English. Lionheart's supersuit is a suit of armor with a big blazing energy sword. The armor lets Richard fly and makes him extra strong, but not strong enough to defeat aliens apparently, at least not at first. Joining up with the Justice League, they fought a bunch of alien parasites that were making London's rivers run red. This entire plot was called Bloodlines, and it will come back. Lionheart did get bitten by an alien, tragic, but he lived and continued to fight another day, still teaming up with the Justice League in the future. During the whole Bloodlines thing, most people who survived alien bites got powers, but it doesn't look like that happened to Lionheart. Did you know that being annoying is not only a talent, but also a superpower? The Heckler is the best at it. His special power is the ability to annoy anybody, which is true. It's annoying how he randomly appears and then disappears forever. His last appearance was more recent. He was in the 2021 series One Star Squadron. It was only about 6 issues, but it was a lot of fun. The Heckler is part of a team of heroes who could make these lists. They are basically on-call superheroes. You use their on-demand hero app to order. The Heckler is just funny. Everything about him. His creator, Keith Giffen, created him in the first place because he wanted to work with Bugs Bunny, but felt that it wouldn't be approved, so he made a superhero Bugs Bunny. Like Bugs, the Heckler essentially makes his opponents destroy themselves through smart mouth comments and pointed insults. In issue 3 of his 6-issue series, they invented a new zodiac sign for him, Heckalarious. If you were born between Pisces and Aries on a leap year, then you are actually Heckalarious. That means you're bright, mirthful, and mischievous. This isn't important, I just think it's funny and relevant because it's a leap year this year. The Heckler's civilian identity is Stuart Mosley, the awkward owner of Skid Row Diner Eats. The Heckler has been in about 14 or 15 comics. He was supposed to get one more, but the 7th Heckler comic never made it to print. That's all, folks. Argus is the name of a few different DC things, the most popular being a US government agency, but the lesser known Argus is Nick Kovac. The US government knows him as Nick Kelly for all the right reasons though. After his father passed, Nick joined the army as Nick Kelly, proving himself capable. He later joined the FBI. Eventually, he had a run-in with an alien, much like our guy Lionheart, and was bit, but he got superpowers. The powers included the regular stuff like extra strength and speed and reflexes, but he also got enhanced vision and invisibility. In Greek mythology, Argus was a giant with 100 eyes, so it's thought that Nick drew inspo from this when he was choosing his hero name. His enhanced vision is very enhanced. He can see ultraviolet, radio waves, x-ray, infrared, if you're lying, through illusions, and slightly see the future, which is kind of wild. He's teamed up with the Flash to defeat an evil robot. Much to his displeasure, he doesn't like the Flash. Argus has had his fair share of hero trauma. At one point, he had his eyes removed, which would be awful for anyone, but if your entire power set is based on your ability to see, that's extra not good. He did get them back though. The last time we saw Argus was in the 2009's Faces of Evil, Prometheus 1, and he was in a team of 3. Fortunately, our guy survived survived, but one team member didn't, and he hasn't been seen since.
This next character was so far out of the continuity that when I started watching Arrow vs. The Flash, I thought Cisco was a completely new character and hero who was made for this show. Yeah, that's how little I knew about this character, and I'm supposed to know everything about every character. Cisco Ramon in the Flash show is a member of Barry Allen's Team Flash. He eventually goes on to gain premonition powers which allow him to see into the future, which he calls vibing. He can basically touch a person and kind of see into their future, taking the superhero name for himself of Vibe. In the series, Cisco gets his powers from the same event that granted Barry his, the particle accelerator explosion, at least initially. And I was surprised to learn that the character of Vibe was actually inspired by the original Vibe who appeared in the comics, or at least the Prime Earth version of Vibe, which was inspired by the original Vibe. The original comic book Vibe was Paco Ramon, whose powers were based in sonic waves, and who hails from the New Earth continuity. Now, the New 52 version from the Prime Earth continuity is Cisco Ramon, who first appeared back in 2012. He gets his powers from one of Darkseid's boom tubes, being exposed to the boom tube, which resulted in his DNA basically being rewritten, giving him powers. His powers are based on vibrational energy, allowing him to emit shock waves, but that's not all. He can also use his vibrational powers to sense and create holes in reality, allowing him to travel to other Earths. He can also vibe with people and get a sense of their past or present, but unlike the show, not their future. These next two heroes I'm going to talk about are a package deal. But we'll start off with the first one in the set, Hawk. Or at least the first one in terms of how most people order their names, I'd say. So, who is Hawk? He is one of the many Hank Halls to have existed over at DC Comics. Possibly one of the reasons why he's faded into the background. There's been a few Hank Halls, honestly. DC tends to shy away from characters who they think, like I said, might be too confusing. Huntress. Any Hank Halls, never seemingly considering that the continuity might be the most confusing thing for fans. Me included. Maybe you too. Hank's Hawk was initially paired up with his brother and is known as an avatar of war. There have been many Hawks since then, but they've pretty much all come and gone since they've been introduced, and now we're back to Hank. The last we saw of Hank, I believe, was in Batman the Brave and the Bold, where he appeared in a cameo capacity alongside the current Dove. Alongside Hawk is typically Dove, the avatar of peace. Initially, this was Hank's brother, Dawn, then following Dawn's death, it became Dawn Granger, who is a girl, Dawn D-A-W-N, who would act as Dove opposite her sister, Holly Granger. Currently, Dawn as Dove works in tandem with Hank, who is Hawk once more. Dove also, I believe, hasn't been seen since her cameo appearance alongside Hank in Batman the Brave and the Bold, and like Hawk, she's also not a prominent hero at DC Comics in the current continuity. At least, I wouldn't consider them to be prominent myself. Some characters fade into the background over time, and some fade into the background only shortly after being introduced to us. I'm actually sad that this hero didn't end up making it as a mainstay. Sideways was one of the heroes we got from what was supposed to be a new era of superheroes. These were all original and new DC heroes created as part of an initiative to basically bring something fresh to the table. Fresh characters, fresh heroes, as opposed to just doing the same thing over and over again. Sideways was kind of similar to Marvel's Spider-Man in terms of his look and to a certain extent his personality. He was a young hero thrown into the world of superheroes, struggling to find his place, a sense of balance, and get a handle on his new teleportation-based powers. Derek James, as Sideways, had the main power of opening up rifts, in some cases interdimensional ones, which he could use to teleport him and others through. While a cool and promising character initially, he got his own self-titled series, but afterwards faded more into the background. His last appearance was more of a cameo and background one in the Dark Crisis event. This next hero hasn't even really got that courtesy though, it seems. For me, Dolphin is one of those characters that I feel like was really cool, and I'm always anticipating her return as a result because I just want to see more of her. But as far as I can tell, we haven't seen her since 2017 in the comics when she appeared in Volume 8 of Aquaman. Now granted, there is a possibility I could be wrong about this, or honestly any other character on the list, and if I am, I'm sorry, do let me know in the comments. I have an approximate knowledge of many things.
I have approximate knowledge of many things.
And the exact last appearances of characters, especially in the DC Comics world continuity, which are a little harder to verify without going back through every single issue from the publisher, because of how information is categorized online. When it comes to Dolphin though, I know she is not well known enough for folks to know who I was talking about when I reacted to the Aquaman 2 trailer on my YouTube channel and incorrectly guessed that she might be the woman in the white costume who actually turned out to be Atlanta, Aquaman's mom. I thought maybe Queen Mara would die in the film and then Dolphin would basically come in to replace her as Aquaman's romantic partner. I was super psyched. I was like, oh my gosh, is Dolphin gonna be in this movie? Oh my gosh, I'm so ready. But I was very wrong about that. Still, Dolphin is a character I'd love to see more of in the DCU and in the comics. In the New Earth continuity, she is the result of an alien experiment, but in the Prime Earth continuity, she's an Atlantean. In both realities, she is an ally of Aquaman, and in the New Earth reality, she even ends up married to his adopted son, Tempest, with the two having a child together who's named Ceridian. Unfortunately, in that continuity, she and Ceridian perish when Atlantis is destroyed by the Spectre. Even in that continuity, she's gone. And in our continuity, we haven't seen her in a long time. Moving on, Aztec in the Prime Earth continuity was a hero who was introduced for one story arc in Justice League of America. Set up to be a much larger and important character in the canon, and then, without much warning, just faded into the background. Since then, she has made a few appearances in Wonder Woman. I will give you that she appeared in Tales of the Titans last September in issue number 3, but at the same time, this is after not appearing for a few years, and even then, her appearances have not really been major. Aztec is Nayeli Constant, who was given the power and responsibility of becoming a hero by her helm. As Aztec, she is tasked with continuing the ancient never-ending fight against the dark god Tezcatlipoca. I bet most people also didn't even know that she was a legacy hero. Yeah, she is. Before we had Nayeli, we also had Uno, who appears in both the New Earth and Prime Earth continuity. But despite DC trying to make Uno's Aztec a thing, it actually did not work out at all. He was only around for about 4 years, with him also getting his battle suit and helmet as well, and that's where his powers come from. They brought him back for the Prime Earth continuity, but only so they could basically kill him off, with Nayeli inheriting his helm, suit, and mantle. And I guess they were hoping, she could be Aztec and maybe everyone will be into it. And then nothing really happened with Aztec. Finally, a few years back, DC hosted their Round Robin, where fans got to vote for which characters and teams would get comic series. One of the series I wanted to happen was focused on this hero, Captain Carrot. Captain Carrot is Rodney Rabbit. In the Prime Earth continuity, he is a Superman-like hero who hails from his own Earth, filled with other anthropomorphic animals like himself, Earth 26, formerly known as Earth-C back in the New Earth continuity. Needless to say, Captain Carrot did not make the cut for DC's Round Robin. I know I was one of the few that wanted that to happen, so I'm still waiting for him to come back into the spotlight again. He hasn't really been around in the comics since 2017. Sadly.
Kicking off the list at number 10 today is Dead Man. Boston Brand was the only son of Gary and Barbara Brand, and his parents were very much not great. When his parents didn't fight each other, they took out their anger on Boston. Because of that, when he was 16 years old, he lashed out against his parents and ran away from home. As you do when you are a fictional character who runs away from home, Boston joined the circus and eventually became an elite gymnast and trapeze performer. While that was great for him, he could not leave his past behind and frequently sought out some form of peace in the bottle and would often become physical with people. Everything for Boston changed though when during one show an assassin from the League of Assassins named Hook took his life during his trapeze performance. When he passed away, Boston was placed in between life and death by the Hindu goddess of balance, Ramakrishna. She told him that he needed to atone for his past transgressions and egocentrism. As punishment, he was to return to the world as a ghost, invisible to most of the world, and he was to better the lives of others using his ghostly abilities, namely the ability to possess others. Now, I don't know about you, but I could see that being easily adapted into a pretty compelling movie. If you've ever seen the Ricky Gervais movie Ghost Town, just take that and superfy it. Number 9. Hellcat. During her formative years, Patsy Walker's fame-obsessed mother, Dorothy, would use her daughter as a way to make a buck, usually while also living vicariously through her daughter, and constantly disapproving of her tomboy nature. Dorothy would pressure her daughter into modeling, and when that didn't work out, due to Patsy's own lack of interest and commitment, Dorothy started a comic book containing fictionalized romantic adventures of her daughter as a teenager, which is super weird. Despite being super creepy, this did give Patsy Walker some notoriety in the Marvel Universe before she finally joined up with the heroes she idolized, the Avengers. And that story itself is kind of funny. Because, basically, using tactics learned from her mother, Patsy blackmailed the mutant Hank McCoy, aka Beast, into helping her transform into a superhero. Patsy tracked down Beast while he was an Avenger and forced him to allow her to accompany them on a mission. During the Avengers ride-along, Patsy found an old costume that once belonged to Greer Nelson, aka Tigra, who could also get her own movie, just saying, but during her early days as the Cat. Now Patsy took the gear for herself and assumed the identity Hellcat. Thanks to the suit, her natural ability plus experience over time with training from Moondragon and her husband Damon Hellstrom, Hellcat has become a force to be reckoned with in Marvel Comics. I think her origin story is pretty damn unique, and I think with a little tweaking it can make for an impactful and pretty awesome movie. Number 8. The Question. Vic Sage, aka The Question, is one of the greatest detectives of the DC universe. Yes, even ranking upside along Batman. Despite having no superpowers, his analytical abilities, finding clues which are overlooked by most people, plus his skill as a fearsome interrogator and martial artist, somewhat on par with Batman, and his faceless mask made of an experimental material called pseudoderm that enables him to change disguises easily, plus his somewhat eccentric personality, make him an incredibly interesting and kinda somewhat creepy protagonist. An old school detective noir movie can easily make him a fan favorite. For any of you who have seen Zack Snyder's Watchmen or who have read the DC comic of the same name, the character of Rorschach was based off of The Question, so we already know that a character like this can work on film. It's just a matter of creating a story that the character can support all on his own. I also think that even a story about his protege, Renee Montoya, would also potentially be even better. Number 7. Sunfire. Shiro Yoshida, otherwise known as Sunfire, is the premier superhero of Japan in Marvel Comics. He is also an alpha-level mutant who possesses the power to manipulate solar radiation. This power allows Sunfire to fly, produce plasma blasts, plasma shields, and generate plasma temperatures of around 1 million degrees Fahrenheit. His powers are pretty similar to those of Johnny Storm, interestingly enough, but Shiro Yoshida is fiercely patriotic, usually choosing to fight for his country over most other teams, and while historically he has normally been a villain, he has been a part of the X-Men and does ultimately do what's best for whoever he is representing. The character's origin and early days had a lot to do with disdain for America specifically, which is kind of fair considering his mother was a survivor of Hiroshima. Shiro is an awesome character who just doesn't get enough time in the light in my opinion, and also having a Japanese hero would help open up a bit more representation in the MCU, which is always welcome. Number 6. Hawkgirl. A movie centered around DC Comics' Hawkgirl might seem like a weird choice, but I think it would be an excellent addition to the superhero film genre for several reasons. First and foremost, Hawkgirl brings a unique and captivating mythology, drawing from an ancient Egyptian lore and reincarnation themes. Her backstory as a former Egyptian princess and a warrior who reincarnates throughout time adds a lot of depth and complexity to the character, making her a fascinating protagonist to explore. Hawkgirl possesses an array of incredible abilities though as well, including enhanced strength, flight, obviously, and mastery of advanced weaponry. These powers, combined with her warrior spirit and strong leadership qualities, make her a pretty powerful and inspiring figure. Now of course this is all similar to Hawkman and he has most of these abilities as well, but Hawkgirl is just cooler, I'm sorry. A Hawkgirl movie would offer the opportunity to delve into complex interpersonal dynamics, particularly her relationship with Hawkman, an eternal love across lifetimes which would provide a compelling emotional anchor for the film. Lastly, as a member of the Justice League, Hawkgirl's inclusion would also open up the door to expanding the DC Extended Universe. A Hawkgirl or maybe even a Hawkgirl and Hawkman movie would just be super cool. I think we can all agree. Number 5. Captain Atom. Nathaniel Atom was transformed into Captain Atom in the 60s after being semi-forced to participate in a potentially fatal experiment sitting at ground zero of a nuclear explosion encased in an alien metal. Now the explosion didn't kill him. What it did do was bond the alien metal to his flesh, giving him superpowers and throwing him 20 or so years forward into the present day. The alien metal gave him incredible abilities such as flight, matter manipulation, and energy manipulation, time manipulation, energy absorption, telepathy, spatial manipulation, quantum manipulation, force field creation, time travel, magic, and mind manipulation, and control of the quantum field. These powers have let him perform some insane feats like creating a universe within the quantum field and later destroying that universe, fighting Superboy Prime, easily defeating a team composed of multiple versions of himself, and before absorbing them and creating an explosion powerful enough to destroy a universal space-time continuum. Now, I think a lot of that is a bit massive for a single superhero film, but I find this character extremely interesting, and I think maybe a space-focused movie about this character would do pretty well if it was handled with a bit more of a serious tone, and I could see it having some mind-blowing visuals. Number 4, Sentry. Robert Reynolds was an addict and a broken man who was granted the power of 1,000,000 exploding suns after illegally partaking in the Golden Sentry Serum, which was an offshoot of the original Super Soldier Serum, except like 100,000 times more powerful. He has photokinetic-based powers fueled by the sun itself that include molecular manipulation, immortality, insane super strength, speed, invulnerability, stamina, agility, reflexes, and senses, flight, teleportation, energy absorption and blast, psionic abilities, and more. Now he used this power for the greater good of all and put together a costume to make his debut as the Sentry. He was the example of what a hero should be. He had connections to Iron Man, was active during the years just prior to the Fantastic Four's emergence. He became a role model for Spider-Man as well as an ally to the X-Men, an equal to Reed Richards, and a friend to the Hulk. He is one of the world's greatest superheroes until the Void arrived. The Void nearly took out Sentry's sidekick Scout. It drove the Hulk into a rampage and took the lives of over 1,000,000 people in Manhattan. When Reynolds realized that the Void was his own dark persona, he enlisted Doctor Strange and Reed Richards, and together they wiped the memory of Sentry from everyone in the world, including themselves. That origin story in the comics, plus his awesome internal struggle with his dark persona, would honestly make for a pretty awesome superhero movie. I'm just saying. Number 3, Wildcats. Wildcats centered around the centuries-long war between aliens called Cherubim and Daemonites. Cherubims, a nearly immortal human-looking alien race with exceptional powers and skills, traveled to Earth and by breeding with humans, populated the planet with half-breeds. Daemonites, on the other hand, besides being incredibly scary to look at, also possess various superhuman abilities, including body possession and mental control over human beings. Now, this movie wouldn't really be a single superhero-focused film. It would be more of an ensemble thing, which hasn't had the best track record in film format. Movies like the first Suicide Squad did not go over well and were hurt by an ensemble. Eternals also hurt from having an ensemble, but I thought it was kind of okay. The second Suicide Squad movie worked out pretty alright though, and I think if handled correctly, the Wildcats could make for a pretty good film and boost up the team for unfamiliar readers in a similar way to something like Guardians of the Galaxy. Number 2, Jack of Hearts. Jack Hart was the son of a brilliant scientist. A scientist that created the ridiculously efficient liquid sci-fi fuel called Zero Fluid. In his tragic comic book backstory, Jack was exposed to this fluid and it gave him his awesome but difficult to control abilities. Importantly, he was also part alien with his mother hailing from the Contraxian race, so that's a whole other thing to this as well. Now, due to the cellular mutation that took place after his Zero Fluid exposure, Jonathan Hart is now able to produce pink concussive energy beams and blasts from his hands and body, taking up the incredibly clever name of Jack of Hearts, apparently in honor of his father's love of card games and not because that's his name, basically. Jack of Hearts can use his Zero Energy Blast to fly at speeds currently not specifically known, but he has flown halfway across the United States in 3 minutes flat, so it's pretty fast. His biological structure was reformatted to basically give him the superhuman starter pack of abilities, but his strength has been able to lift 25 tons. He has enhanced speed, stamina, healing factor, and durability, able to withstand some pretty heavy hits and survive in the vacuum of space. But in addition, thanks to a a quote symbiote energy sump device, Jack went through another mutation which gave him the ability to think as fast as a computer can, and he can retain and retrieve stored information from the deep recesses of his brain, which is pretty cool, I'm not gonna lie. Given the nature of his stories and the way the MCU is opening up to space and the multiverse, I think it would be doable to introduce this character, although he has been difficult to write stories for in the past, so I think it would need some reworking. And finally, in at number 1, it's the Silver Surfer. Now, I know the character has been featured in the second Fantastic Four movie back in the day, and he was cool and all, but his story specifically focused on Norrin Radd and Galactus properly? Come on. As a herald of Galactus, the Devourer of Worlds, the Silver Surfer's journey from being an unwilling servant to a cosmic hero, saving entire worlds from destruction, is filled with existential themes and moral dilemmas. The movie could explore the character's profound introspection and inner conflict as he grapples with the weight of his past and the choices he must make to protect his universe. The cosmic scope of Silver Surfer's adventures would allow for awesome space exploration, celestial battles, and mind-bending visuals. Plus, his encounters with other heroes like the Fantastic Four, Thor, and Nova could make exciting crossover potential within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. A Silver Surfer movie would not only offer thrilling action and epic cosmic conflicts, but also delve into deep philosophical themes and open up the cosmic side of the MCU just a touch more.
Number 10, Uncle Ben Spider-Man. I've had people ask me before about a world where Uncle Ben potentially becomes Spider-Man, and well, I'm here to tell you it already exists. This version of Uncle Ben first appeared in the Spider-Verse story. He was with Peter when the radioactive spider came along and ended up biting him instead of young Peter Parker. Discovering he had gained powers, Uncle Ben set out to do what you'd expect him to, try and use them for good to help people. However, this career as a vigilante would be short-lived. After the murder of his wife May and nephew Peter at the hands of his arch nemesis, he retired. For a while, he also went into hiding after Ezekiel Sims came to warn him of Morlun. Eventually, however, he would be found by Silk, who would then, with the help of the other spiders, recruit him into their ranks to help them take on the Inheritors. Number 9, Web-Slinger. Web-Slinger is our Wild West Spider-Man. Named Patrick O'Hara, this alternate Spider-Man first appeared in the comics in 2014, and would also have an animated version of his character appear a few years later in 2016 in the Disney XD animated series Ultimate Spider-Man. Web-Slinger also works alongside his partner and horse, Widow. We'd also learn that he has a special connection with his horse as well. They were actually both bitten by the same radioactive spider, which grants them a telepathic connection that Web-Slinger likes to refer to as his rider sense. And before we move on to our next spot, if you love the world of alternate Spider-Man as much as I do, be sure to show that love by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, Spider-Man. While fans of the world of spider totems and alternate Spideys may know Spider-Man, she's still only made just a handful of appearances in the comics, if you can believe that. I decided to include her here to shout out how awesome she is to those who have yet to meet her, because Spider-Man deserves a series of her own, or at the very least, a movie appearance. And Into the Spider-Verse 2, maybe? We see Spider-Man's origins in a what-if issue where the question is posed, what if Aunt May had been bitten by that fateful radioactive spider instead? After Peter forgot to take his lunch with him to school, Aunt May set out to deliver it, and it was while running this errand that she was bitten by the spider, granting her powers instead of Peter. And Spider-Man was born! In this reality, Uncle Ben and Peter Parker still both live as well, and are actually part of Aunt May's team, knowing her secret. Uncle Ben provides the heart, Peter's the brains, and May provides the courage and the bronze.
Number 7, Zatanna. A lot of people sleep on Zatanna, and that is a mistake. Zatanna is part of the Homo Magi race, giving her a genetic talent for magic that makes her one of the greatest magic users in the DC universe. Zatanna was born with magic, but she's not limited by that. With the addition of learned magics, Zatanna can cast a whole multitude of spells that allow her to do things like travel dimensions, summon objects and beings, perform telekinesis and advanced telepathy, redirect and return attacks, mess with the weather or even time of day, manipulate her own size, transform into basically anything, become intangible, and manipulate magical versions of the elements. But that's all the basic stuff. She can cast spells that can manipulate reality, alter the molecular structure of objects, and move forward, backwards, and freeze time itself. And that's not even getting into what she can do with black magic. She has the potential to make child's play out of most of the people in the Justice League despite that fact. But Zatanna's backstory of becoming a successful stage illusionist before discovering her true magical powers and her half-homo magi parentage while investigating the disappearance of her father? You can't tell me that wouldn't make for a great movie. Number 6. Martian Manhunter. John Johns, or John Jones on Earth, is another character that people really sleep on. But this guy is insane with his level of ability. John is the last of his race of Martians, and he is extremely powerful and should never be slept on. He speaks with the resolve and intelligence of someone who's been around for a very hot minute, and that's because he has been. According to DC Comics, he is in the ballpark of around or over 220 million years old. John arrived on Earth after he was pulled here through space and time by a teleportation beam during an experiment conducted by a Dr. Saul Erdel, who passed away from the shock of actually finding a Martian shortly afterwards, which actually kind of makes sense. But way before that, John's race, the Martians, were practically wiped out a long time ago, leaving him completely alone and isolated. But now, pulled forward in time and finally on Earth with no one to tell him what the heck was going on, he eventually used his shapeshifting abilities to become a detective operating in Middletown, America. He mainly operated from the safety of his human persona before he eventually exposed himself to the world and became a founding member of the Justice League, and also one of its most powerful members, being even stronger and more capable than Superman with an even more impressive list of abilities. And that makes him a good candidate for a movie, just saying. Number 5. Mr. Miracle. This one would be a bit of a different movie, and I think it would work well as a duo with the character of Orion. Basically, Scott Free, aka Mr. Miracle, is the son of DC's Highfather, who is essentially the opposite to the villain Darkseid. As part of a truce with Darkseid, Scott was traded with Darkseid's son, Orion. While Orion got to live a pretty good life with Highfather and become a hero, Scott was treated incredibly badly living on Apokolips as basically a prisoner of Darkseid. But despite the hellish conditions on Apokolips, Scott was able to retain his inherent goodness, and using his skill as a master escape artist, and despite the fact that he is a pacifist, he escaped from Darkseid's clutches. Telling that story in a movie format would be awesome, and then it could lead into more stories with the rest of DC's roster of cinematic heroes. I personally think his story is incredibly interesting and unique. Number 4. Darkhawk. Christopher Powell was the son of a cop and a district attorney, and when he witnessed his father taking a bribe from a mob boss, he happened to stumble upon an amulet that gave him the ability to transfer his consciousness to the Darkhawk armor. This ancient Shi'ar magical armor is very cool, and it gave Chris quite the set of abilities. Obviously, the classic superhuman strength, speed, durability, agility, and reflexes are all here in excess, but the armor allowed for armament conjuration from the extra-dimensional expanse, whatever that means, and basically had untapped potential. As time went on and he eventually gained the ability to go to space, he learned of the Shi'ar origins of his suit and of the fraternity of raptors, that are basically like Marvel's over-the-top, super cool space cops. Almost like Green Lanterns, but cooler and less utilized. I'm just imagining how Darkhawk could fit into the MCU's ever-expanding roster and stories, and I think it would be a missed opportunity to not include the character. Number 3. Starbrand. Starbrand isn't so much a singular person as it is a power in and of itself. Right now, the current Starbrand in the 616 universe is Brandy Selby, the daughter of Suzanne Selby, who became the Starbrand after the one before her, Kevi Connor, passed away. The Avengers stepped in and had to help Suzanne deliver little Brandy, an act that caused Suzanne to pass away, sadly, and attach the Starbrand to Brandy. Since Brandy's birth, she's used the Starbrand to fly and survive without oxygen and in the vacuum of space, and she can use extremely powerful energy blasts that can take down multiple people at once. But the Starbrand itself is an incredible source of power, proven by other people who have wielded it. The bearer of Earth 723's Starbrand used the power to create music that can influence human behavior, to the extent that he has unified the people of his world as a single hive mind. Earth 541 is the home of a Starbrand bearer who has conquered his world and installed himself as the head of a benevolent monarchical dictatorship. But like, a good one that actually somehow works despite the lack of freedom. The Starbrand power takes on many different forms, but doesn't seem to be bound by physics, and supplies the bearer infinite power limited only by their imagination. While that kind of power sort of breaks a lot of things in the MCU, the amount of Starbrand bearers going back millions of years gives a plethora of character stories to pick from, and I mean, let's be honest, someone being granted an ancient incredible power is a classic basis for a superhero movie. Number 2, Nightwing. Now, Nightwing is in no way a forgotten hero, not even a little bit. But explain to me how we have had around 11 Batman live action movies, and I don't think Nightwing has appeared as Nightwing in a single one. Well, now I don't want him just featured, I want a full-on Nightwing movie in Bloodhaven with little to no Batman. Of all the members of the Bat family, Dick Grayson was not only the very first, but for a lot of people, including me, he is the favorite. Born to a family of acrobats, orphaned and then taken in by Bruce Wayne, Dick became the very first Robin, appearing in Detective Comics number 38 in 1940, created by Bob Kane and Bill Finger, and illustrated by Jerry Robinson. As you can imagine, he has a long history, and as such, a large amount of experience and proficiency. He was the leader of the Teen Titans for a while, and when his Robin career came to an end, he became Nightwing to honor another hero by the same name from Krypton, Superman's home planet. He has gone on to take the Batman mantle a couple of times, but honestly, it was in 1995 and 1996 when he received his own stories that he really became his own. To set Nightwing apart from Batman, he was given his own city, the decaying harbor town known as Bloodhaven, which was just north of Gotham. It allowed him to be close enough to Gotham to stay part of the Batman family, as well as have his own city and series of adventures, and honestly, some of them are even darker and somewhat better and more compelling than some of Batman's own stories. And finally, in at number 1, Blue Marvel. A former Marine and scientist turned superhero, Adam Brashear is not only one of the strongest heavy hitters in Marvel Comics, but he is also one of the smartest characters and one of my absolute underutilized favorites. His origins take place in the 1960s during a project to use antimatter as an energy source. Adam and his best friend Connor were caught in an explosion that turned Adam into a living, stable antimatter reactor. Luckily, this also gave him superpowers, which he used to become the masked hero known as the Blue Marvel. Unfortunately though, Connor became unstable both physically and mentally and became the incredibly powerful villain Anti-Man. During one of their biggest and climactic fights, the Blue Marvel's mask was torn, revealing to the world that he was African American. Due to the socio-political climate of America in the 1960s, President John F. Kennedy asked Blue Marvel to take an early retirement to ease racial tensions. It wasn't until decades later in the modern age that Adam would once again step up as the Blue Marvel, one of the most interesting and powerful heroes the world has, yet one that often feels really underappreciated. A movie for this character would give him the fame that he rightly deserves.
Number 10, Sentry. Okay. I know we all probably are familiar with the Sentry ourselves, but we can't have a list about forgotten heroes and just not mention the Sentry, the greatest hero that the world forgot. Sentry has a super sad story, so grab some tissues and hold them close while I regale you. Robert Reynolds was an addict who, after sneaking into a lab late one night looking for a fix, stumbled upon the Golden Sentry formula. After he had quaffed the formula, I love that word, quaffed, he was transformed into the Sentry, an amazing hero with a slew of powerful abilities. We're talking flight, teleportation, molecule manipulation, super strength, and super speed, virtually invulnerability, to name a few. Unfortunately, Robert's mind was unstable, and while embodying the superhero Sentry, he also became his antithesis, the Void. In a last-ditch attempt to save the world from the effects of his supervillain alter ego, Mr. Fantastic was forced to create a device that would make Robert and the whole world forget about the Sentry, hoping that it would destroy the Void and protect Robert from the darker side of himself. So yeah, we didn't really forget about him, but everyone in the comics forgot about him. So yeah. Number 9, Green Llama. Introduced in the 1940s, the Green Llama was a hero who embodied the ideals of Buddhism. Oddly enough, sort of like a Buddhist Batman, though his look echoes that of Green Arrow, or even perhaps Green Lantern. In other words, it involves a lot of green. and even a cute little cape. Though interestingly enough, the Green Llama is not a DC hero and not a Marvel one either. He comes to us from Moonstone Books Publishing and was introduced in their Double Detective series, volume number 5. Something unique that he brings is a more Eastern-inspired outlook, which would be even more interesting if he were a genuine character from Tibet, perhaps. Instead, he is a student of Buddhism, who studied in Tibet but is from New York. He returned to New York to share his Buddhist beliefs and provide spiritual guidance, but he ultimately decided that the mystical Buddhist powers he had acquired were even more useful fighting crime. When I said he was similar to Batman, I was responding to his crime-fighting beliefs, and that he does not use a gun, believing they would make him just as bad as those who he seeks to defeat. And the fact that he's also super rich. Number 8. Phantom Rider, also known as Knight Rider. No, I'm not talking about that Knight Rider, the classic TV show starring David Hasselhoff, and his high-tech car KITT. Though Michael Knight is a hero too, I suppose. I am talking about Marvel's Knight Rider, aka Phantom Rider, aka Ghost Rider? That's right, this Ghost Rider actually predates Johnny Blaze. Carter Slade, the horse-riding boxing champion of the Wild West, who is the Phantom Rider, would have been known as Ghost Rider as well had they not introduced Johnny after Slade's death in the comics in 1972. Carter Slade was a man who was near death when he was taken in and revived by Native Americans who realized that he was a man destined to fight injustice. They healed him, gave him some magic powder, snazzy white cape, and a white horse. He went on to round up criminals, but met his end sacrificing his life for his brothers, crushed by rubble. His brother Lincoln Slade would eventually adopt his mantle, Phantom Rider. Both have returned in spirit form, but have never been fully resurrected.
Number 7. Spider-Man. This alternate version of the character is like something out of a horror story, and I've personally always been a big fan of that idea for Spider-Man characters, that integration of horror that we sometimes see. I mean, the character, when you think about it, is meant to be someone whose genetics mutated and became kind of spliced with the spiders. What isn't freaky about that, I ask you? Spiders-Man is a version of Peter who fell into a vat of spiders and ended up being devoured, but at the same time his consciousness remained, being transferred to that of spiders. So think Swarm, but with spiders instead of bees. And voila! He became the horrifying alternate version of Spidey known as Spiders-Man, with all of Peter's memories but without his original body, and where his power is spiders. Number 6. Stan the Spider-Man? A very brief appearance for this character, but still, this is a thing that officially happened in the comics. Stan Lee is even listed as being this version of Spider-Man in the breakdown of characters who appeared in this issue online. Spider-Geddon issue number 5 at the beginning has a tribute to Stan the Man Lee, who passed away the same year only about a month earlier. But the tribute isn't confined to just the cover or the insert in his memory. They also included a tribute in the story for Stan, where he appears as one of the alternate Spider-Men, helping to save the day. We don't know much about this alternate Spider-Man, but we do know he's meant to be an alternate version of both Spidey and Stan combined. Number 5. The Spider. Still a bit of a mysterious figure for us. The Spider is an alternate version of Spider-Man where instead of Peter Parker, we have Detective George Stacy in the role. Yep, that's right, that's Gwen's father. In fact, he even joined up with his alternate daughter, Ghost Spider, who recruited him for the Spider Army. That had to have been interesting. Detective Stacy seems to fake an injury to help keep his identity a secret. We know that in the alternate Earth that he is from, he still has his daughter Gwen, or had her. It's unclear as to whether she is still alive or maybe died when we first meet him. He wears an all-black suit which looks like a tactical stealth suit with white lines stretching from the crown of his head down to his forehead, and a thin white spider on his chest. Number 4. Spider-Girl. But not any of the first people that come to mind when we say Spider-Girl. This alternate version of Spider-Man comes to us from the What If series, from an issue where we get to imagine 3 different characters becoming Spider-Man. One of them being Betty Brant. Betty Brant's Spider-Girl has really only made a few major appearances in the comics since her debut in 1978, and when you see her costume, I'm sure you're gonna understand perhaps why that's happened. In the What If series, hers was one of the few that didn't end in death, with her quitting being Spider-Girl instead after she learned she had failed to stop Uncle Ben's killer. Rather than be inspired to commit to a life as a vigilante, this event actually had the opposite effect on Betty Brant, though we'd find out later that Betty didn't completely give up being Spider-Girl, as she would appear much later in the Spider-Verse story. Number 3, Savage Spider-Man. I know there have probably been a lot of characters from various stories who share this kind of origins, but Savage Spider-Man's still always makes me think of Cyclops, aka Scott Summers. I know he's not the only one to have an origins like this, but they're similar to me. This version of Peter Parker was the only known survivor after the plane he was on with his parents exploded. That's the part that's similar. The rest of it is not. Young Peter managed to parachute to safety, but landed in Savage Land, right in the middle of a nest of giant spiders. These spiders raised him as their own, and it was through their venomous bites that he gained powers, as well as likely building up a natural resistance. I'm assuming that part, but I think it's fair to guess. This version of Spider-Man is the sworn protector of the Savage Lands from all of those who would seek to do it harm or do harm to its creatures. Not on Savage Spider-Man's watch. Basically Spider Tarzan. Number 2, the other old man Peter. I call him the other, not in reference to that storyline, the other, but in reference to the fact that we have alternate old man Peter Parker from Reign, who, while still obscure, is a little more well known, I think, because, well, he's just so frighteningly sad and memorable. Other old man Peter, however, is still pretty excellent, and I think he deserves to be remembered as well. He's a lot more optimistic than his fellow old counterpart, except when it comes to one thing. This version of Peter Parker resides in a retirement home with an elderly Wade Flippin' Wilson. Understandably, both elderly alternates appear in the Spider-Man/Deadpool series and end up getting involved in an adventure with our mainstream heroes themselves. In this alternate reality, Peter Parker lives out the rest of his life after getting paralyzed from the waist down, getting around in a wheelchair. But of course, still 100% a badass, because yeah, people in wheelchairs also a badass. He can even roll up walls and still is insanely strong. Still not a Spidey that you would want to mess with. Also, I love that old man Spidey always has like a bow tie. I think it's super cute. Number 1, Golden Sponge Cake Spider-Man. Basically, Hostess Spider-Man. This alternate Spider-Man was far too good for our world and was one of the first killed in the Spider-Verse event. No! He fought his villains by using tasty Hostess snacks, which apparently can tame any villain. Is the reality just like that villains are all hungry? I wonder if they would work on Galactus. You need some big ones. Hostess Spider-Man originally appeared in the Hostess brand ads, but as the Spider-Verse is a wide world event, he was incorporated into the main story, only to really be killed off, poor guy. His editorial name had to be changed due to trademark issues, as he was, of course, no longer running in a Hostess ad. But on to the main story, baby. Does this mean there is a whole alternate world filled with Hostess ad characters? Because Spider-Man wasn't the only hero to appear in those. What happened to the rest of that world? Is it still out there? I want to go to that alternate Earth.